Hi folks, it's Rich here. It's a super exciting day. We've got Nina back and we've got a lovely Strat. More importantly, we've got Tom.
Hello!
Here at Tom's Guitar Shack. Tom has very kindly taken both of these good guitars and made them flipping amazing. So I'm going to hand over to Tom and let him tell you what he's done with the Strat, what he's done with the lovely Nina, why they're better, what he thinks about them, and if we're lucky, he might have a little Raz as well and play some, because he can actually play.
Wow.
So, yeah, you can. So, we're going to start with the Strat, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously everyone knows this Strat, but it's had quite a bit done to it. Just knock the amp off there, so don't kill anybody. As you can see, the look of it's changed a bit. It's a bit more like a Hendrix kind of Strat now, which is what Rich wanted to go for. And luckily I had quite a lot of these parts lying around as he seemed to accumulate things over the years, and luckily it was just all fit into place, and it looks great. It's better than it did with the tortoiseshell anyway. I think you think that, yeah. It's that kind of classic Strat look, black switch tip, because I didn't have a cream one, but still it's cool.
Cool.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, it's a bit different. Yeah, so in terms of the guitar then, so where do we start? The frets were pretty good on this guitar actually. I think for a guitar of this sort of money, I mean, I get guitars in all price ranges, you know, ranging from, you know, lower end Harley Benton stuff to, you know, £3,000-4,000 custom shop guitars, and trust me when I see custom shop guitars that need fretwork straight from Fender. So it's not a, you know, you're not always guaranteed to get perfect frets if you spend amazing money. Yeah. Now these weren't perfect, but they were very good. I think there was one maybe high fret, and the fret ends weren't great. I've rolled the fingerboard as well, so it gives you that more sort of vintage kind of played in feel that people like.
Yeah.
The fretboard, it wasn't a rosewood fretboard, it is the Indian Laurel.
Indian Laurel.
And there's a good sort of fix for that really, in terms of if you don't like, you know, Palfaro fretboards or anything other than rosewood, you can sort of make them feel a bit more like rosewood. A lot of the time those woods are drier woods, so they sort of feel dry. It's the only way of kind of explaining it. And I just use a furniture sort of lemon oil, let it soak in a bit. This one drank quite a lot, and it just oils the board up a bit. Rosewood is an oily wood, so the fact that it drinks some of the oil, it just makes it feel a bit more like a rosewood board. I mean, it doesn't feel exactly the same, but it's a lot closer.
It is.
You close your eyes, you can't really tell the difference.
That was reasonably dark as well as for an Indian Laurel.
Yeah,
it
was. Yeah, they are. Yeah, it was a nice, you know, nice piece of wood. It's darkened up a little bit more now, I think, after being oiled up, which is nice. You know, everyone likes, you know, a dark board. But on the whole, yeah, this guitar, it's amazing value for money really, but they do need work. I think if you're buying them, you have to kind of understand that they're not perfect. You know, you're not going to get a Fender Strat for, you know, 120 quid or whatever they are.
Yeah. So what did you do with the electronics then, Tom?
So yeah, that's what I was going to move on to next.
Sorry,
so no, it's all right. No. So essentially, the electronics are the pickups are the original Roswell pickups. Nothing wrong with those. I really like them. Big fan of them, especially the single cores. But essentially, the pots have been replaced with some high.
These are the old ones.
They're the old tiny pots. I've sent Rich some pictures of the bigger pots. Obviously, can't show me now, but the pots have been changed. Some nice high quality pots. They've got a vintage taper, which is nice, but they taper nicely, you know, through the whole range of the pot.
Yeah.
The switch has been changed because that other switch was made of chocolate, and this one is a nice quality oak Grigsby or
Tom,
Grigsby.
put that by the camera.
Oh, sorry.
Do the click.
I need to do the Rich thing where
Listen to that click. Oh, it's so clicky. Oh, it's like my knees.
Yeah, especially when you get up
it's on this sofa.
But yeah, so the switch has been changed. Basically, it's been rewired, and I've rewired it to like a vintage Strat spec, which is you know, preferably. I mean, it doesn't make as much difference with Strats as it does Les Pauls, which we'll talk about in a bit. But it's wired as you would a Strat from the 50s, which for me is just preferable. I think it brings the best out of the pickups, and even more so, like I say, we'll talk about it a bit with a Les Paul. But yeah, that's essentially it for this guitar. Oh, just about the neck angle as well. One of the biggest issues with this is the neck angle was quite off. So if I'm going to just exaggerate with it, the neck was more like that when it should be like that, and obviously I'm exaggerating to be slight. So the neck pocket has been shimmed as well to get the angle right. In terms of general things, it wasn't too bad. There was a bit of an adjustment needed on the truss rod. The nut wasn't terribly badly cut at all. It had been lowered a bit and did a little bit of work on it, but nothing major. The tuners I really like, and big tip for anybody who's got a Harley Benton and they think, oh, these vintage tuners aren't very good. They are really good, or they're very good for the money, I should say. Nice tip is to just use 3-in-1 oil. You'll see the holes on the back. They are made for oiling the gears.
I did not know this.
So squeeze a bit of 3-in-1 oil in there. Don't use WD-40 or anything like that. You'll ruin your. If it gets into the wood, it will stain the wood. So just a bit of 3-in-1 oil, and I mean literally a drop. You don't need any more than that. If they've got no strings on, wind it around a few times, or wind your strings on and let the oil get through the system, sort of thing, and it makes a big difference. They're not going to feel like high-end clousons or anything, but little things do make a big difference. And I think that's the main thing about these Harley Benton guitars, is little things can make big differences. Yeah. We didn't change the bridge out, although we talked about it, but actually it's not too bad. Yeah, it's got a small block and whatever else, but it stays in tune great. It's floating now. If it was me, I'd be quite happy just to leave it.
But Tom's just been playing it for about 10 or 15 minutes and giving it a little bit of grief, and it stayed in tune perfectly as well.
Yeah. It's really good.
Also, it's very kindly wired the bridge tone down here as well.
Yeah.
And Tom's very kindly going to give us a bit of a demo, because he can play guitar, I can't. He's going to have a little razz.
I'd say if you've got another amp, let's have a jam. But if you wanted to give it a bit of a go, we can.
Yes. So yeah, Tom will give you a little demo of how it is. I'll move out of the way here so I don't get hit by the.
I won't be able to play now on camera.
I know. Tom's guitar chat. Look at the back of this t-shirt as well. I'm going to get right in front of the camera. Take it away, Tom.
Quite a bit of gain on there. Yeah, it's a. Sounds like a Strat. Yeah, it's cool. It's a nice guitar. I think the biggest thing about these is the pickups are really good. They're just maybe held back a little bit by, that the pots aren't great and whatever else. Which is a shame, because for a little bit more money you can make a fantastic guitar. I'd put this up against anything else really. If you got a custom shop Strat in the room, I think if you closed your eyes and listened, you wouldn't hear a dramatic difference. This sounds like a Strat, like an old 60s Strat.
Can I have a little bit clean, Tom, as well?
Of course you can, yeah, absolutely.
Give me a little clean razz.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a Blackstar ID15 TVP amp, which I'll get
good
to let
amp.
you know about.
Impressed with it.
There we go.
Good amp.
From a man who knows stuff. That sounds fabulous.
The nice thing about it is you've kind of got that real bell-like tone.
Yeah.
That proper Stratty sound. That proper.
Hey, that's the word.
I knew went with that, but
yeah.
It's that kind of tone out of it, which is just it's great. It sounds really clean. It sounds great and everything, to be honest.
One thing I asked Tom as well on the neck radius, it's listed as 12-inch. All the Harley Bentons have gone to 12-inch. They used to be 13.78. It felt flatter. Tom's had a little measure, and it's a bit more than 12, but it's not as much as 13.
Yeah, it's about 12 and a half. I think Is it uncommon to see that? No, it's a budget guitar at the end of the day, so close is close enough.
Yeah,
you won't feel any difference there if I handed you a dead-on 12-1 and 12.5, you'd say they're the same. Yeah. I mean, I know you said they were 13.5 before they dropped it to 12 or something.
Yeah, 13.78 they were. All the standard one. I know, bizarrely. But,
yeah. No, it's somewhere a bit less than that, but it's there or thereabouts, which is fine. The nice thing about a flatter radius is you can get away with bends like this. With a lower action, it doesn't fret out. If you've got the vintage sort of 725 radius, it's kind of a bit of a compromise really. If you want a low action, you have to accept a bit of buzzing or fretting out, as they call it. And if you don't want that, then you have to accept it's a higher action. And that's the thing about the true vintage spec guitars. All radiuses have their place really. And I think this is a nice radius for this guitar for the kind of person that's going to want to buy it and play it, whatever else.
That's nice.
Yeah, well, it's the action's nice and low now. It's like just over a millimetre at the 12th fret, which is super low for a Strat. Easy to play. And that's what you want really. I think if you would say to me, I like the vintage style board, but I'm okay with a little bit of a higher action. But if you say to me, is it a great feeling guitar? It feels great. Nothing wrong with that at all. That's the advantages of those radiuses. But that's it for the Strat. I think
Shall we move on to the mighty Mina?
That's the one.
Yeah. Hey Sarah Jane, if you're listening, a present to me has had some upgrades, and we'll let Tom have a little talk about that as well.
Okay.
Take it away, Tom.
So start again. So obviously with this guitar, it's more of a higher end Harley Benton guitar, and it's got obviously some quality components, the Gotoh bridge and tail piece and the tuners, which is called the Graftech nut and what have you, and obviously the upgraded pickups. Now when Rich brought this over to me, he said, I'm not too keen on the pickups, they just sound a bit muddy, I think was kind of the word. And
it's kind of nasally on the bridge and muddy on the neck, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, and I totally agree. I plugged it in and I hated it, to be honest. It sounded awful. It sounded like someone had put my amp underwater, and it was just that muffled kind of blanket over the guitar sound, which I didn't like. And I thought, because we talked, and you talked about maybe changing the pickups.
I did, yeah.
And I thought, they're not great pickups at all, which I was surprised about, because the Roswell pickups, and I know these are labelled as Tesla, probably nothing to do with old Elon, but but they're meant to be the higher end pickups. And I looked at the specs of them online. I thought, well, I'm just gonna see what they're meant to be, and the specs are good for them. They're they're Alnico 5 pickups. They're basically based on a 59 set of PAF style pickups, and so they should, on paper, with the specs they had, I think it's the 42 gauge enamel wire and whatever else, they should be good pickups.
And the output as well, because that's surprising.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that. As well. It's that was a strange one, because you were right. As soon as I plugged it in, the neck sounded louder than the bridge, which is unusual, even with the bridge adjusted and what have you. And again, I can't quite exactly put my finger on what that was, but again, this has had all the electronics changed. It's got the vintage style pots in. Changed the push-pull pot as well, because that really only works between 1 and 2. There wasn't much of a range, between any of the rest of it. So all the electronics have been changed. It's got a new cap in, things like that. The switch has stayed the same. Rich wasn't too happy with the switch, but it just turns out that it wasn't tightened up, properly from the factory. It was quite loose, which I think gave it that sort of floppy feel, and now it feels like a good switch. It was a decent
that myself,
lazy. No, they're hard to do actually. They're hard. I couldn't do it. Well, they're not hard to do if you've got pliers and things, but then you can chew up the teeth. I've actually got a special tool that goes over the top and fits properly and doesn't knacker all that up, which is what can happen. So yeah, it just needed tightening up, and a bit of switch cleaner in there. Jobs are good. But yeah, electronics have been changed, which make a hell of a difference. The biggest difference to this guitar is it was wired in a way that was what people would call a modern. I keep doing that. People would call a modern wiring. And I looked at the way it was wired, and I didn't like it. It just seemed to me that a lot of the tone was being, or a lot of the tone of the pickups would have been going to ground. Now I can't explain why that was. It's just from experience of seeing thousands of guitars that I just didn't like the way it was wired, so I totally rewired it. And I've wired it using sort of a vintage spec, which is, if you're looking into it, it's just a 50s or 60s Les, well, 60s is slightly different, so I'll say 50s because that's how I've wired it. It's a 50s Les Paul spec of wiring, so it's the old school way of wiring them basically. And it's totally opened the guitar up. It's totally changed the pickups. They're brighter, they're clearer. You can hear the balance across the strings. I mean, Rich will tell you they're so different, aren't
completely. And also the with the push pull as well, the volume drop between single coil and humbucker is hardly noticeable now, which is great because I really wanted the single coil kind of sound you get, but I didn't want the volume to disappear that much so that it was unusable, which it kind of was really.
Yeah, it did drop a lot, and you find that with coil tap guitars, most of them. I mean, the best company that for having the best sounding split coil sounds is PRS. Yeah. And I sort of did a bit of research, mainly what triggered it was after Savannah. So, God rest her soul. But, you know, the thing that made me look into it further was that, and essentially it's simple really. Rather than sending the one coil that you get rid of to ground, so you only have the one coil working, you use a resistor. Now this has got a 3K resistor in it. You can use anything between a 2K and a 5K, I think people use up to. This has got a 3K resistor in it. The higher the resistor value, the less volume will drop from the signal. Don't ask me exactly how it works, but I just know that it does. It's basically, it sends less of the power of the signal from the coil to ground, something like that. But yeah, simple trick, but makes a big difference. PRS have been doing it for a while, and that's why their single coil splits sound superior to most.
And the output of these, was it about 7 and 8?
Yeah, well, it was just less than 8 on that. I think 7.9 something, so virtually 8, and that was like 8.2 something like that, which is basically within the perfect range spec of a PAF pickup. You know, they're that lower output. These days you would call it lower output humbuckers, but you know, not that they are low output, and low output doesn't necessarily mean anything bad at all. It's if you've got a higher output pickup, it just drives the amp a lot more, and they're more for more modern style metal playing or something like that, which you probably like actually. But
I like metal, but I'm not interested in playing it.
No. If you like blues or rock or classic rock, anything like that, you want to go for the PAF. So anything sort of up to the sort of early 80s really, or a bit further along than that. But you know, when they started bringing the Super Strats out, and you got Seymour Duncan making, you know, high output pickups because people wanted to. It's the time before there was loads of pedals. You know, there wasn't the pedals where you could just have loads of drive. I mean, you had the fuzz and whatever else. But the intention is how do we make the amp? How do we push the amp harder? How do we make it louder and whatever else? And doing that was one way of it. But for me, PAFs are my personal favourite. And these are great pickups. Absolutely nothing wrong with them at all. I've got some, I was telling Rich earlier, I've got a nice Les Paul at home with some Seymour Duncan antiquities in, and they're, you know, expensive PAF copy pickups, and I'd say these sound just as good. You know, or, you know, certainly on par, they're certainly not bad sounding pickups, they sound great.
Tuners,
yes.
Nuts and frets.
Yes, this is going to be a long video, this is. But yeah, so the frets are stainless steel frets. Obviously, they're sort of, there's a, you're either in that camp or out of that camp. I'm kind of neither really. I think everything has its place, and I quite like them. I think they have the place. I do personally prefer nickel silver, but
I do actually, funnily enough.
Yeah, but you know, they will last. You know, they will outlive you, and they will outlive me. And you know, this guitar probably won't have any fretwear when, you know, we're in old people's homes. But you know, they will just last a long time, which is great when you've got them perfect. They should stay that way. I mean, you may get issues where one pops out slightly and you have a high fret and whatever else, but you know, that's just normal. But in terms of the actual frets, they will last a very, very long time.
You're saying that they weren't very level though?
No, they weren't. Although someone had a go at leveling them, but they weren't as good as the Strat. The Strat had a better.
We'll just hold this again just because it's so lovely.
Yeah, why not? You need something to hold. But yeah, so there was a few frets needed leveling. I'm going to say it was 4 or 5, nothing major. The main issue with these is that they'd had a go at leveling them from the factory, which you'd have to do with stainless steel. But they just weren't finished great.
No,
they were very sort of scratchy, and they just weren't polished as well as they should be. Now, the reason that is, it takes a long time to polish stainless steel frets. They're not as easy to polish as nickel silver. But but you know, it's a case of just spending the time and polishing them up, and you know, again, roll the fret ends on this as well. Well, roll the fretboard slightly and dress the fret ends down. There were quite sort of a lot of marks on the edge, and you know, I've not been able to get rid of 100% of all of them, but they're certainly a lot better than they were. It's difficult when they're, you know, the necks on the guitar and whatever else to get into where you need to, but you know, it's as good as anything else. The frets now they're nice and smooth to play, aren't they? They're really nice, and you can almost see your face in them, which is what you want. Yep. And they should stay that way for a while. You know, when you change your strings, you can wipe them down and whatever else. And if you want to polish them up, you can get some 000. Well, the best thing actually for this, because you don't want to get any of that in the pickups, but I like to use 000 white wall, just quickly wipe them over and do that. But you can get some, probably good idea to get some fret rubbers or something like that.
Yeah, I've got a fret rubber actually.
Oh, there you go then. Yeah, something like that, clean them up nice. Yeah, and jobs are good.
The nut?
The nut was, now I had a theory with this with Rich, obviously it's Graphtec nut, which is, you know, in factory terms, more expensive than the basic plastic ones. My theory on this was the nut wasn't cut great, it was quite high. I had to take it down quite a lot, and then actually had to take a fair bit off the nut and polish it back up. I think because they're of a certain price range, they're kind of it's a hit it and hope situation in the factory where they put them in, and it is where it is.
Yeah. It's a bit high, wasn't it?
It was very high, very high. Much higher than the Strat. But I think it was just because they don't want to risk, you know, whoever's doing a bit of a setup on this guitar, sort of, because once you cut the nut too low, you have to bin it and start again. So you have to. So if they're doing that with thousands of guitars every day, and you know, if they're messing up, I don't know, 100 of them, it's coming out the bottom line. So they kind of leave it to the next person who's going to get it to get somebody to do it, which is fine. But yeah, the nut is cut. When you're playing chords, you can feel a massive difference. It's so much easier to play. The biggest thing, which was a silly thing really, is I remember Rich said that he didn't like the Gotoh tuners, which I'm a fan of Gotoh. I mean, he liked Grovers, I like Grovers as well. Grovers are great, but the only issue with these tuners was is that they weren't tightened down properly. Basically, they were loose here, which didn't give you a very good feel. The other issue as well is you had on the tuners, and obviously you see you got the screws down there. You can see that. Ooh, you can see down there you got the screws. Some of them were loose and some of them were a bit tighter, which doesn't give you a good sort of consistent feel across the tuners. So again, tighten those up, made them feel consistently the same. The 2 or 3 that were loose up here, tighten those up, and they're great tuners. There's nothing wrong with them. It stays in tune perfectly. But yeah, I think that's pretty much everything.
That's a lot.
But everything, basically, on both guitars, everything that could be done to them to make them better really has been done. Apart from replacing the bridge on the Strat, which
doesn't need.
You know, it doesn't really need. No, you know, like I said to you when you came popped over to mine, I said, you know, you could put a Wilkinson bridge on it or something like that, which would, okay, it's a better quality bridge, it'll look a bit better and what have you, but that stays in tune great. Personally, I'll leave it alone. If it works, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think that's everything on this guitar. Did you want to do a little sound check on this one?
I think yes, you can, sir. Come on.
If you
take it away. Plug it in.
If you wanted to. Still on the clean mode at the moment. So that's the in-between position, but as you can hear, very, very, very bright now. It's, you know, you can hear.
It's just more articulate, it's clearer.
I mean, listen to that. That sounds great. It's just awesome. And then when you've got the chord split on it, so I'll play a chord and then we'll chord split it. So you get a bit of a drop, but not dramatic. But you can. The main thing is you can hear that more single coil tone. I mean, it's never going to sound like a Strat, but you know, you just get that kind of high end that you get with single coils. Put it back into full humbucker mode. You get that fatness. There's a bit of a volume drop. You'll always get a bit.
It's just makes it more useful, though, doesn't it? Because you can use your single coil and not, you know, it's not that you've just disappeared from nowhere.
Absolutely, yeah. And before it was like that.
It was,
and it was an issue really. But
yeah, it's perfect. That is absolutely perfect.
You get a bit of a drop, but it's not nothing dramatic. The nice thing is if you put it on a bit of gain. Cleans up enough to just kind of give you that overdriven single coily kind of sound. And if you fatten it up with the you know, putting it back in, and that's on the neck pickup. So bright, sounds great, but if you go, it sounds great.
Nice.
It's a really, the pickups are really good. There's nothing wrong with them at all. And I think in terms of value for money, it's once you fix the little issues on them, they're great. You know, it's not a £280 guitar now, in my opinion.
No.
Just by tone and playability and whatever else, you know.
Yeah.
It's great. It's a great. It sounds like a Les Paul. Simple as that, really. It sounds like a great Les Paul.
And do you know what? I think even like some of the more expensive guitars I've had, okay, some of the wiring, some of the electronics would have, probably are better. But even so, all guitars need some TLC, don't they? So I suppose if you're not mega fussed by the brand on the headstock,
absolutely.
You know, well, if you think of this Strat now, you know what you've got there. I mean, and consider that recently that Tele player that I bought that had some problems that had to go back, and you know, and the player Strat that I got, which was actually fine, but would still needed a setup. That's like £600. You're better off, I think, getting something that costs less, paying the money to make it be perfect, and spending pissing the rest of the money at the wall.
I think if you can get away from the sort of the name on the headstock, or the shape on the headstock isn't quite this or quite that, whatever the little differences. You know, fundamentally, if we were to put this on a track it would sound like a great Les Paul. Yeah. You know, and you could say, oh, it's a 10 grand custom shop Les Paul, and no one would probably be able to tell you it wasn't, not from listening to it. But you know, and in terms of feel and playability, it's a great feel and playing guitar. You know, all guitars feel and play different, but if you can get away from, as we were saying, you know, the name on the headstock and things, you can get a lot for your money elsewhere. And yes, you do have to put a bit of money into it to maybe change the pots or change this, change that, which you can do, and you can do it yourself. You know, with a little bit of, there's so many videos on YouTube that show you how to do everything these days. And if you're confident, have a go. There's not really much you can do to mess anything up seriously, you know, unless you literally break something. But it's you know, it's not. It can be difficult to do that on the guitar. People are often scared of truss rods and things like that, and you know, there's no reason to be really. Just don't go crazy with it. If it's tight, really tight, you know, leave it alone. Don't get tight in it, like you would anything else, really. But yeah.
Although Tom, having said that, if you need some stuff done to your guitar,
give me a shout.
You go to, you can don't do it yourself.
I'm talking myself out of work. But, you know, if you can, if you live far away, you can post your stuff to me as well. No problem at all. Courier it, whatever you want to say. But you can get a lot for your money, and I think especially with Harley Bentons, the nice thing is fundamentally for the price, they are really well built guitars. You know, they are, you know, they're not perfect, but I've had custom shop guitars in that weren't perfect and what have you. You've got to remember as well is they're, especially with these, they're made in, you know, they're made far away. It's spent how many weeks probably being shipped over on a boat or whatever else in a container, and you know, different humidities, and humidities is the worst thing for guitars. So you know, whilst it might have left the factory feeling different to when you get it, you know, setup work normally has, and that's the same with all guitars. You know, guitars that are made in America, Strats, you know, Fenders and Gibsons. They get the same issues. You know, I do have clients that will go and buy an expensive guitar and won't even take it out of the box. They just bring it to me and like sort it out, kind of thing. And I've seen lots of high-end guitars that have problems. You know, most recent years, and people, you know, the Gibson quality control issue is a well-known thing, and I've seen some crazy quality control issues on £3,000 acoustics from Gibson and whatever else, where they've left all the bits of sawdust inside the guitar, and you just think, you know, why? A lot of the time it's little things that make a big difference. You know, but in terms of what you get for your money, that sounds like a great Strat. This sounds like a great Les Paul. And if you're happy to sort of ignore the fact that it doesn't say Fender and Gibson on the headstock, then you know, I mean, you were talking about you play a Strat and what have you in terms of spec. On paper now, really, you know, okay, you can say, well, different woods are used and this, that, the other, but that is just a great playing and feeling sound of Strat.
I think that's the thing with
not much in it.
With Fenders. I said this before in some of my videos as well, when I got a bullet Strat, you know, and is a player worth 5 times the amount. And I think, to all intents and purposes, you know, it sounds like a Strat, kind of plays like a Strat, and unless you're like a gigging musician or something's important to you, from that point of view, I just can't see that much extra value in them now, especially now that they're like 600 plus, because it's still, you know, a Fender Strat is a it's a plain guitar. There's no fancy tops, no fancy locking tune. There's no fancy anything actually.
Well, they were invented. Well, Leo Fender created them to be simple.
Yeah.
You know, they were bolt together guitars that were easy to put together and simple parts. You know, it's like with pickups. I mean, you're talking about the Bullet Strat and what have you. I don't know in terms of spec exactly on those, but I think they've got like ceramic pickups and whatever else. And that's where the biggest sort of loss is in terms of those, which is what's nice about the Harley Bentons. The Roswell pickups are good pickups. You know, they're not the best pickups in the world, but they're certainly far away from the worst. You know, they are. I would say they're higher than sort of mid-range. I would sort of say they're to be middle and upper range. But you know, a single core Strat pickup is so simple. It's if you break it down, it's just a bit of wire wrapped around some magnets, and if you're doing that with and ticking certain boxes, you'll have a good pickup. You know,
I think the thing is as well that with costs, particularly on the Mexican Fender stuff, £600 for me is just too much money for what that actually is. I can't, you know, and it's one of the reasons I sent the player Strat back, the white one I had. So actually, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It was just sat in my room, you know, on the stand, and I'm thinking,
justify it.
No, it didn't feel like it. When you've got your Harley Bentons at 122 quid, you know, so straight out of the box, and even if you spent a bit of money on it, or even for a Squire Affinity for that matter, which are a couple hundred now, which have replaced the standard series and are better. I don't know, there's something about a Mexican Fender that's like that. It's just too much money for a bog standard guitar. You know what I mean? So,
and it just depends on, you know, a lot of people they have to have that Fender on the headstock, and that's fine. I'm not knocking Fender, I'm not knocking Gibson. I love those companies, they're great. They've come up, they've made the best guitars ever made, ever. You know, literally made history with those guitars. But in terms of just for if you want something that it depends how serious you are of a player. You know, most professional musicians aren't going to get up on stage with a Harley Benton. They're not going to do it. And I understand that. You know, I can totally appreciate that as well. So it's just about what you're happy to do. But for someone that sort of, if you're happy to play at home, you know, buying a Gibson or buying a Fender, and this is the main thing to remember, isn't going to make you a better player.
No, it's not.
And
I've tried that.
and actually, I think if you tick some simple boxes, you can get great tone. I think sometimes the money is better spent if you've got a reasonably good playing guitar. And it's got, you know, Alnico pickups, which make a big difference to me, ceramic pickups. Unless you're doing the high output metal kind of sound, then ceramic people like that with humbuckers and whatever else. But in terms of just saying the sort of general consensus, really, if you've got good, decent Alnico pickups like that's in these, and the setup okay, and they play well and whatever else, the money that you're going to put into a £600, £700, £800 guitar, you're better off buying a really good amp. If you want good sound, most of your sound will come from that amp. If as long as you've got reasonable pickups, you know, and they are more than reasonable, I would say, you know, I put those through my gear, and I've got some, you know, I'm not bragging, but I've got some nice gear I've had over a fair amount of time, and that Strat sounds as good as some of my Strats that are 10 times the value of that. And close your eyes. I mean, I got lost playing that for 2 hours. My missus had to come out and say, come on, you need to help me put the kids to bed. Because I just played it for a couple of hours and thought, God, this is great. You know, it sounds really good. But if I put it through a bad amp, it would have never sounded great. You know, it's kind of, I think sometimes people think, oh, I need this guitar to play like this person or sound like this person or whatever else. That's true to a degree. You know, you're not going to sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan with a Les Paul. You know, if you want that tone, you need a Strat. And you can get those kind of tones from that Strat, but a lot of it is more in the amp than anything else.
Great. Well, there you go. So, Guitar Tech Tom. I'll put a link in the description below. Done some wonderful stuff with the ST-62 and the SC-DLX Gotoh here. Good value for money. If you need some stuff doing to guitar, Tom's your man. Thanks for watching. Cheers, Tom.
Cheers. Thanks, Rich.
Okay.